back. Welcome to This Reader's Life. My name's Stephanie. I'm glad that you're here. And I feel like I've been away for a really long time, and it was just Christmas sort of got in the way, so to speak, if you want to talk about Christmas that way. Anyway, I had a great time. It was great with family, and I am back. And I've read more than I ever expected to read during this time. But I sort of went backwards in a way because I didn't read anything new. I was looking for books from my past, partly because it's that time of year, I think, when you look back on things, but also because my physical library is so small, and I'm trying to decide whether I want to do something about that or not. I haven't always had a small library. It became small over time. So here comes my puppy dog. Hello. Hello, you want to come up here and say hi? Do you? Say not yet? Okay, that's all right. I guess Truman is camera shy. I just fed him, so he's coming back to see if maybe there's a few more slivers or morsels I will give him, but he's not going to get them. Anyway, so I started looking back to see what were some of the top sellers, and I had to decide how far back I want to go, and I thought, well, I was born in 1960, so that's where I'm going to start. And I went to see what some of the top sellers from 1960 were, and there were quite a few interesting ones that were interesting to me. One of them was Eleanor Roosevelt wrote her autobiography, and I would sort of like to read that, but I think it might be 3 volumes, so I decided not to do that right now. But of course, the first thing that pops up in 1960 was a book that I was sure I had already read, and I still can't figure out how I could have not read it yet. The book is To Kill a Mockingbird, which won the Pulitzer Prize. It is one of the greatest books of all time. And if you had asked me, did you ever read it? I'd say, yep, had to read it in high school. It was okay. It wasn't my favorite book or anything. And then I looked it up and checked it out through a free library and read To Kill a Mockingbird. And I had never read it. I can't believe that I've never read it. And there's part of me that is so glad that I didn't read it until now, because had I read it in high school and we'd have hashed it all up, or had I read it later, I don't think I would have gotten the same thing out of it that I get now. We've come so far from 1960. And here, kind of an interesting story. I was born in 1960. I was born in Georgia in 1960. My father was in the service, and my mother went down to Georgia because they lived in Kansas City, Kansas. But she went to Georgia because, well, number one, they missed each other so desperately, but also because my dad called her and said, did you know that you can have a baby when you're in the service and the service pays for it? And so they decided it was a great time to have a baby. And consequently, here I am. But also the thing that's interesting is that my mom was from Kansas. She hadn't experienced any kind of racial tension to speak of in her entire life. It was completely foreign to her. And then she went to Georgia, to a small town in Georgia, where the situation was so dramatically different that she talked about it. Her eyes she would tear up when she talked about it because it broke her heart in so many ways. And she said one of the hardest things for her was that when a white woman walked down the sidewalk, if there was a black man walking towards her, he stepped off the sidewalk no matter what. And it was just so humiliating to my mother to see such a thing, and she felt so guilty about it, and it made her so uncomfortable. The other thing that's sort of a neat story is that they lived in a little trailer park, and this was before I was born and shortly after I was born. I have no memory of any of this, but it's still a neat story. Mom said that she used to watch the kids walk to school every day. It kind of fascinated her, all the little kids, and she said all the kids walked together to a certain point, and she said they all played together, they all teased, hollered at each other. She said every last one of them was barefoot. She said none of them ever had any shoes on, and she said none of them looked like they had a lot. That was the part that she was living in a trailer in near Milledgeville, Georgia, and there wasn't a lot of money in that area. And my dad was at Fort Gordon, but she said when the kids were walking to school, they'd all walk together, and there was a spot not very long from where she was able to watch them, where all of the black kids divided and all the white kids divided, and they went off to their respective schools, and she was astonished by that. She had never thought about it. This would have been in 1960, so there was definitely a great deal of segregation at that time. It was a shameful amount of it, and it wasn't. We hadn't had Brown versus the Brown versus the Board of Education had occurred just a few years earlier than that. I think 1954 was when that was. But my mom talked about that because she said there was one adorable little girl who had lots of little pigtails with little barrettes on the end of every pigtail. And my mom asked her what her name was. And the little girl told her, "My name's Stephanie, but they call me Stevie." And my mother loved that. And I was named Stephanie, which she said that was what made her decide to call me Stephanie. They talked about calling me Stevie, and my dad always called me Steffi. So my nickname was Steffi. But anyway, I'll see rabbit hole. Sorry. I can't help myself sometimes. I remember great stories and great memories. But anyway, To Kill a Mockingbird. The book was released in 1960. It won the Pulitzer Prize in 1961. Of course, Harper Lee wrote it. Harper Lee was an interesting person herself, and part of the reason that she was able to write the book was because she was gifted the money to be able to take the time to concentrate on writing a novel, which she did. The other thing that was really, really interesting about her, I think, is that her next door neighbor a neighbor of hers was Truman Capote. And I think, what a neighborhood that must have been. And in the book, To Kill a Mockingbird, one of the characters, which is a friend that visits them in the summers, is named Dill. And it's believed that Truman Capote was probably the inspiration for Dill. And now, knowing that after having read the book, it seems quite likely to me. I can see where that would. I can certainly see Truman Capote. They talk about him being kind of a small little guy. And Truman Capote was not a very tall man, and quite an interesting figure to meet up with. He definitely had strong opinions about a lot of different things. And Harper Lee also traveled with Truman Capote to Kansas when he was writing In Cold Blood, which is the story of the murders of the Kansas farm family, the Clutters, by two murderers. But anyway, and I might get back to In Cold Blood. I have read that before. But To Kill a Mockingbird is the story of a little girl, her brother, their father, Atticus, who is an attorney, and several other side characters. Calpurnia, their housekeeper, who was there all day to help Atticus with his children. He was widowed. And there's sort of two stories that go on. Early on, the little girl, whose nickname is Scout. It's actually, her real name is Jean Louise, and but her nickname is Scout. And she and her brother are they have sort of a fascination with a recluse that lives next door, named Boo Radley. And his real name is Arthur, but he's been called Boo Radley for a long time. And they're just kind of fascinated by him, and they want to see who he is. And there's all kinds of stories about him. Kind of like the witch, that lives in the old house that's just back from the edge of the road or whatever. But they don't torment him, but they borderline torment him. And Atticus kind of catches him on and lets him know, cut it out. And Boo Radley is obviously aware. They realize because he starts to leave little things for them in a little knot hole in a tree as they pass by. So that's a part of the story. And then the other part of the story is that Atticus is an attorney who has taken on what he knows is going to be a difficult case, and it is to defend a black man who has been accused of the rape of a white woman. And this is in Georgia in the 1930s. The story takes place from about I think 1933 to 1935, but that was a time when race relations were, it was a very difficult time. Things had not moved forward. Prejudice and racism was rampant, prevalent, and truly wicked. But anyway, he knows he's going to take this on, and he knows that the town there's going to be a lot of separation and a lot of problems. And so anybody that's read To Kill a Mockingbird knows that I just didn't tell you I don't want to give anything away, but this story was touching and beautiful. And if I could have a hero, it would be Atticus. He is my hero forever, because he was such a steady, fair, decent person who wanted so desperately for the world to be just, and for there to be justice, and for there to be fairness in the world for everyone. And he fought for that for his children too. He let them be themselves. He let them be who they were. And he was just a good, gentle, steady human being. And I enjoyed that. They say that it was based, the character of Atticus was based on Harper Lee's father, who was an attorney who lost a major case defending two black men. I don't know what they had done, but he lost the case. I know that. So that was To Kill a Mockingbird. I thought it was so beautifully written, and I thought it was so, again, setting played such a big part of it. Part of it might be because I had seen bits. I had never seen the entire movie. I will soon, I can guarantee you that. But I had seen bits and pieces of the movie, and so part of the setting sort of sprang to life for me because of what I had seen in the movie. But it's brought out so beautifully in the book. There was some controversy about the book, of course. It's on the banned book lists because of the content, because of the language, and so over the years, it's certainly created. I can't decide on the word. The controversy is the word that comes to me, and it's something more than that. And it has. People have strong opinions about it one way or the other, but looking back on it and thinking about the situation in 1960, what an interesting time for that to have been published. I cannot see how it wouldn't have raised a great bit of controversy. And still, I can't figure out how I have never read it. But so that's what I think about To Kill a Mockingbird. I think it should be required reading, and I've never been that way about books. But I think everybody should read that book. It's beautiful. The next book that I read was, again, I was going back through popular books from the 60s because I was kind of looking in that direction. And the book that I found that I decided to read was The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein. It's very short. It's not quite a poem, but it could probably be considered a poem. But The Giving Tree it was written in 1964. Again, it had some controversy surrounding it too for a couple of different reasons, which I'm not going to even go into because I think they're so silly. But The Giving Tree is about an apple tree who is friends with a little boy, and how through the years the apple tree gives to the little boy when he's in need of something. And it starts with the little boy gathering the leaves and playing in the shade under the tree. And he makes a little crown for himself out of the leaves. And the tree loves him, and the little boy loves the apple tree. The next thing that happens is the little boy's a little bit older. And one of the next things that he needs is money because he's a teenager and he needs some money. And the tree says, well, I can give you my apples. I'll give you apples, and you can sell the apples, and you'll make money. And so the tree gives up its apples for the boy, and the boy, of course, is able to sell the apples and make money. Then a bit later, as the boy ages a little, and every time the tree gives to the little boy, the tree is very happy, which is such a beautiful lesson and so easy to understand if your nature is to be a giver. the tree gives its branches so the boy can can build a home. The tree gives eventually the boy needs a boat, and that at that point the tree allows itself to be cut down to a stump and tells it you can have it to make the boat. And it says the young man does that, or the middle-aged man does that, and the tree was very happy, but not really. And however, this is a truly giving tree, and so the boy comes back as an old man and has one more thing that he needs, and the tree says, I don't have anything to give you, and the boy says, all I want to do is rest. And it's just such a sweet, to me it was very sweet. Now some people said it was that the boy was not thankful, he wasn't likable, that the apple tree was too giving, and I can see where someone comes up with that. Somebody wrote some different versions of it and said that the tree didn't have any boundaries, and so all of that strikes me as just flat out silly. It's just a sweet story, and that theme of giving and then of taking, and of the lack of thankfulness, which makes it such a great teaching tool, because to explain to children how that must feel when you give and give. And anyway, it's a lovely story. I have always liked Shel Silverstein, and I had never read that. I've read Where the Sidewalk Ends and other books by him. Great poet, can make me giggle time and time again, and he's very, very deep, and he's able to get a lot across with humor, and which is always a nice way to learn. The next book, still going in the 60s, was published in 1967. And again, if you had asked me, have you read this? I'd have said, yep, I absolutely read it in high school. I'm sure I did. I remember the cover of the book. I remember seeing it on apparently other people's desks and in their pile of school books. But it was The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. And of course, S.E. Hinton was a female writer who started writing this book when she was about 15 years old. It wasn't published until she was 18, but she wrote it because she didn't feel like teenage life was being represented accurately or fairly, and that there was apparently in her own town, and I don't know how, I don't know what the autobiographical qualities are, but she wrote this book about a group of boys that were considered to be the greasers, and their conflicts and fights and problems with another group of boys who were called the socials, the guys that had higher standing. So it was sort of the poor boys and the rich boys fighting back and forth, but it was rather violent, and the line was rather distinct. It was a hard line, but the main character is Pony Boy, who is a 14-year-old who has two elder brothers. He's being raised by the oldest brother, who is 20. His parents have been killed in a car accident, and the oldest one is trying desperately to hold them together, and he's lost some of his sense of humor because of it. And he rides Pony Boy pretty hard, partly because he sees a lot of potential in his youngest brother, and Pony Boy is the narrator of the story. So, and you can tell, and I didn't think that was the greatest writing I've ever read in my entire life. I thought it was a good story, and I enjoyed it. Looking back, had I read it in high school, I definitely would have enjoyed it, and I would have shed a few tears. As an adult, and as the story is still timely, kids can still read The Outsiders and definitely identify in different ways. But it made me think a little bit of the movie A Rebel Without a Cause. It made me think of West Side Story just a little bit. And so I liked the book. and I can understand why it was it resonated with teenagers for sure, for sure. Then the other thing I was going to say, I'm going back kind of sorry, to Kill a Mockingbird, is that Harper Lee, for forever, for a long, long time, that was her book, and that was really all that we had of Harper Lee. And and I always find this suspicious, and maybe it's correct and maybe it's not correct, but I believe it was after she had passed away that they published her other book, which is called Go Set a Watchman. And I have not read that. And I've read a short synopsis of it with no spoilers to speak of. And I can't decide whether it would be worth it to me to read it. To me, To Kill a Mockingbird is so complete within itself, and such a story that needs nothing else to be said about it. And my understanding is that it may be that this Go Set a Watchman was written before To Kill a Mockingbird, but the story actually takes place in the years after the To Kill a Mockingbird. So it's an older Scal and an older Atticus, and that his beliefs maybe are not as steady or fair, or that perhaps he believes more in segregation than anyone would have expected him to believe. I don't know. It makes me not want to read it. So I'm really, really curious to know from someone who did read it, Go Set a Watchman, what they thought, and if it's Harper Lee at her second best, or is it a great book? I would really like to know what people think about it. I just read for enjoyment. I always have. I've never read because I'm searching for knowledge. Although I think the reading that we do does helps us individually define what we believe. I do want to spend a little time with those oldies but goodies, or blasts from the past. I know it's not music, it's books, but it's sort of the same idea. And sometimes just the cover of a book can bring back a memory, which I can definitely say The Outsiders did for me when I decided to read it and saw the cover online when I was looking at it. And then the other thing is, going into 2026, I had been thinking really seriously about trying to go back and read more hardcover books, read more physical books that I could hold in my hand. And I kind of came to a decision that I am not going to do that. I'm going to keep my Kindle. I'm going to use the library. Into 2026, I'll announce more about my to-be-reads, but hopefully it will have a little bit of difference to it. It will not be whatever everybody else is reading right now might not be what I'm reading. But again, I love a good story, so that's my goal, is to dive into some of those older novels that tell those wonderful, wonderful stories written by great authors that are not even with us anymore. So that's it for this time. I'm going to Arizona in just a couple of days to see my grandson, and I'm really excited about that. I'm going to try to do at least one video while I'm there. I'm not sure exactly how that'll work, but I'm gonna take minimal equipment, so I may, I'm still learning how to do all this anyway. So if it's choppy and not very good, well, then it's choppy and not very good. But I'll still have something to talk about, something to tell you, and we'll see what my grandson's favorite books are right now. He is in second grade. No, I'm not telling you the truth. He's in first grade. Until I am back, please be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and be kind to the planet. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.